الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب السماوات ورب الأرض رب العالمين، وله الكبرياء في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات. ربنا لك الحمد حتى ترضى، ولك الحمد إذا رضيت، ولك الحمد بعد الرضا. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا الأولين والآخرين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الملك الحق المبين، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله وأمين مع وحيه. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. Dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, all praise and glory and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything we have, وما بكم من نعمة فمن الله. يا أيها الناس اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم هل من خالق غير الله يرزقكم من السماء والأرض. And we are dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all our needs. يا أيها الناس فقراء إلى الله والله هو الغني الحميد. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, the two verses that we just recited, they can really shape up your life. اتقوا الله حق تقاته, be mindful of Allah as is His due, a level that we will never reach, but we can only come close to it. So we need to strive all our life to be closer and closer to Allah. And we can do that by being better people, better person, and by doing more fi sabilillah. And of course that requires that you learn more. You learn more, you implement, that makes you a better person, and you use that knowledge to make this world a better place. That will increase your taqwa and get you closer and closer to haqqa tuqatah. And then in the second verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and be mindful of Allah and let every soul check what you have prepared for tomorrow. What did you invest and save with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What did you prepare? Because the moment we leave this life, everything changes. Everything that's keeping us busy now becomes useless. Your job, your bank account, your money, all of this suddenly becomes useless. And there become only one thing that becomes useful for you is what you send forth. وَمَا تُقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ تَجِدُوهُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Whatever you send forth, you will find it. So make sure that you check that account of saving and investment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and always try to increase it and do more fi sabilillah. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, yesterday I had a discussion with the brother. He was surprised and upset with the way Muslims behave and interact. Akhlaq Muslimin wa mu'amalatihim. Especially when he goes to the Muslim world. He was at pain and upset. Because he says that what I see runs against the teachings of Islam and the manners of Islam. People behavior and muamala and dealing, the way they deal with each other, does not reflect the teachings of Islam and the akhlaq of Islam. And especially he said that he was shocked many times when you see a person who is religious and he practices Islam and there are Islamic appearances, yet the way he deals at home, with family and with others and in business and at work does not reflect the teachings of Islam. I said, why you are surprised? And I'm surprised that you are surprised. You shouldn't be surprised. This is a very natural outcome. And if we properly understand our deen, and what happened to it through history, then this becomes normal. That's what you expect. And you cannot expect something that is different. I told him something that I kept mentioning here many times. That's the version of Islam that we inherited. That's the version of Islam that was presented to these people, and they accepted it, and they embraced it. They were told that's what Islam is. That if you pray, and if you fast, and if you don't drink, and if you don't commit zina, then you're good, regardless of anything else. That's in the back of the minds of majority of Muslims nowadays. And some people, even this short list, they played with it. Some people dropped prayer, they kept fasting, but they dropped prayer. And some people, they dropped almost everything. They said, Allah Ghafur Rahim, and we are Muslims, inshallah things will work out. Yeah. And these are not minority. That's not a small segment. This is probably the major part, unfortunately. So lying and cheating and being unfair at home with spouses or children or neighbors, that's not part of the deal. That's why people, they don't even feel guilty. They don't feel guilty with this schizophrenia, these two personalities in one. I'm in the masjid, never miss a prayer, pray sunnah, fast Ramadan and fast sunnah. I have a beer, I have this, I have that. But they can bribe and can take bribery. And they can find justification for that. I can be lousy in my job. I can cause harm to my neighbor or spouse. These are not related. These are two hats. And you go to the masjid or the prayer, and then I wear the other hat. Then, so, being biased, treat people unfairly, harming people with words or with action, that's not part of the deen. That's not part of the deen that we inherited. The twisted deen, dhulm, committing injustice or accepting it, which is totally wrong. In Islam, you are not allowed to commit injustice and you are not allowed to accept it. You're not allowed to accept someone who will abuse you. So you don't exceed your limits, but also don't allow others to exceed their limits. Whether they are regular people that you deal with or whether they are people who are in charge. It's your responsibility to draw the line and to push back. So, unfortunately, our people are the product. I was discussing with the brother and explaining. I said that our people are the product of 12 or 13 or 12 centuries of oppression and political and intellectual stagnation. 12 centuries, we're accepting the rule of a family, dynasty. One individual has the absolute power, and when he dies, his brother or his son inherits the power. We accepted that for 12 centuries. And this person decides war and peace, manage the treasure the way he wants. And if the money is not enough, he can prescribe more taxes on people, squeeze them more. And no accountability, no transparency whatsoever. And these people suppressed freedom of right and thinking and expression, all freedoms and rights. So our people, generations, were not free to think, were not free to express themselves. What do you expect? You want to know what to expect? Read the book by Abdurrahman al-Kawakibi, Tabaya al-Istibdad. Tabaya al-Istibdad, the consequences or the nature of dictatorship or oppression. It is translated in English, it's available as PDF online. It's a booklet, it's not even a book, it's a booklet that talks about what happens to the manners of people when they live under oppression. And Ibn Khaldun mentioned clearly that this kind of oppression corrupts akhlaq al-nas, corrupts, spoils the manners of people, teach them hypocrisy, Teach them to put masks. Teach them to use crooked way, because the straight ways do not get you anywhere. In order to get your right, you have to pay bribery. You have to have someone who will get it for you, wasta, etc. So you get used to that under this kind of government or regime. Those 12 centuries, they were followed by decades of what? Of colonization. We went from bad to worse. Dictatorship, dynasty, rule, and now it is occupation. There is someone, foreigner, who's ruling you. And making you a slave in your own country. And we lived for decades under that. And then after that, dictatorship came back in a worse version. Now we have these totalitarian military regimes who govern for decades. Now, what do you expect? What do you expect generations like more than 13 centuries now? 13th century and a half, 12 dictatorship, 3/4 of a century colonization, 3/4 of dictatorship coming back. What do you expect is going to happen to Islam first? I'm going to explain why the true Islam cannot coexist with this kind of government. One or the other. If people subscribe to the true Islam, they will not accept this kind of rule. If they accept this kind of rule, then they have to abandon the true Islam. The two cannot coexist, and we'll explain why. And then decades of dictatorship and totalitarian regimes. Now, Islam is the product of those centuries. The current Islam, the current version of Islam, is the product of those centuries. Islam was manipulated and mutilated. Why? Again, because the original Islam cannot coexist with that system of governance. Why the true Islam cannot exist with that type of governance? Because the true Islam liberates people. يضع عنهم إصرهم والأغلال التي كانت عليهم. Break the shackles, makes you a free person. متى استعبدتم الناس وقد ولدتهم أمهاتهم أحرارا. عمر بن الخطاب said, who gave you the right to enslave people when they were born free? So Islam free you from any form of enslaving. You're not going to worship idols, you're not going to fear people, you're not going to worship money, nothing. You are a free person, and they don't like that. They want you to be subdued. They want you to be submissive. Islam inspires you, makes you very ambitious, gives you strong willpower, azima and irada, empowers you, gives you natural rights that nobody can take away. If you understand the true Islam, you know that you have fundamental rights that nobody can take away. And nobody can give them to you as a favor. Because that's what generations of Muslims, they come to accept that whatever the government gives them, thank you. That's a favor. That's not a favor. Nobody is doing. Whoever is in charge is working for you. That's why they call them public servant. Those who understand, they call them public servant. So we're going to have to understand, Islam makes you understand all of these. Islam makes you live as human, free, and as a citizen. And these type of ruler, they want you as a subject. They don't want you to be enlightened. They don't want you to be aware. They don't want you to be aware of your rights. They don't want that. And that's why the only way is to manipulate Islam and then keep the parts of Islam that does not threaten their rule or their system or their power. Islam gives you a mission of Islah and Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. These people, they don't want that. They don't want you to be someone who's calling for reform, calling for justice, calling for transparency, calling for equal opportunity. They don't want that. They want to do whatever they want. And they don't want people who are fulfilling that mission of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. Islam gives you purpose in life, mission and purposes, maqasid. And on top of those maqasid is justice. On top of those purposes is justice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly command us to stand out firmly for justice. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط. It's not an option. Stand out firmly for justice. And these people, they are not just, so they don't want this kind of individuals in their societies. Islam gives you the right to choose your leaders, and they're not chosen. They are there because they inherited. It's in the family. Islam tells you to hold your leaders accountable. That's what the companions were doing in Khilaf al-Rashida with somebody like Umar al-Khattab, charisma, leadership, etc. Yet, average companion used to hold him accountable, to discuss with him. Actually, people discuss with the Prophet ﷺ. Those who understood Islam properly, they discuss. As long as it's not a revelation, it's not a wahi, they discuss with the Rasul ﷺ. And these people, they don't want anybody who's going to oppose or argue or have an opinion or make an opposition. And Islam tells you to force those who are in charge to consult and to be transparent. And they don't want to consult and they don't want to be transparent. That's why one of them has to be, they cannot coexist, either a dynasty rule or a true Islam. And since the dynasty rule prevailed, the true Islam has gone. And we inherited this Islam that the brother was surprised with when he sees that contradiction between the appearances of people, and the people are very religious. But when it comes to their akhlaq and their interaction and their dealing, that does not reflect the teachings of Islam. Now, those centuries, and it is about time to accept this. Now, we can't keep living in denial forever, because there is a narration that is prevalent among Muslims that says our history was all rosy and all great. That's not true. And the moment you accept that, you're going to confuse yourself. Because if it was all rosy and great, why we ended up in this situation? That's already a contradiction. It's not. There are very bright pages in the history of Muslims, but there are also very dark and very shameful and embarrassing pages of civil war and bloody wars, etc. So it's mixed bag. Why mixed bag? Because we're a human being. And that's not a history of Islam, that's history of Muslims. It's a history of a human being. So they did a lot of good things and they did a lot of bad things. So we should not start from this idea that it was perfect and it was great, all great and all rosy. That's not true. Because if you start with that, then you can create a confusion for yourself. You will never be able to understand the reality. Because if you want to change the reality, any reality, whether your reality as a person or as a family or as a community or any reality, if you want to change it, then number one, you have to understand. And you have to accept it as is, not as you like it. Confront the brutal facts. No gloss over. Accept the reality as is, even if it is tough, even if it is painful, because that's the beginning of solution. When you accept the reality and you don't go into denial or gloss over. Gloss over meaning make the reality look better than what it is, or deny it altogether. So, understanding the reality as is, not the way you want it. And second, understand how and why you came to this point. Again, that applies to your personal life, your family life, everywhere, at any level. How and why you came to this point. Then what? Then number 3, come up with a vision. A vision is a big word. It just means what you want to do, where you want to go. Okay, I am at this point. I understand where I am now. I understand how and why I came to this point. I want to chart a new course for myself, but first I need to specified destination, where things, how you want to be in 10 years from now, how you want your family to be, how you want, whatever, come up and then develop a plan to get there and start executing it. There is no other approach. And if you start wrong with the first step, which unfortunately we have problem in all the steps. We have problem in all these steps. Number one, we usually don't like to accept the reality as is, but we accept it as we want it. That's why nowadays everybody is following the source of news that tell them what they want to hear. You can find two individuals living in the same house. Everybody has a very different perception of what's going on. In Palestine, in Syria, in Lebanon, anywhere in the world. Why? Because everybody is listening to different sources. And why? Because everybody wants to follow the source that tells them what they want to hear. They don't want another opinion. So, accepting the reality as is, always look for the truth, not for what is convenient, and then understand how and why we get to this point. And then, again, the other steps, as I said, we have problems in all these steps. Now, those centuries caused a lot of damage. Those centuries caused a lot of damage to our understanding of Islam, to our understanding of life and our role in it, specifically to our mission in life, which has gone. Why it has gone? Because it's not compatible with that kind of governance. To our personality and to our mindset, the way we think. Actually, we were trained not to think. Religious scholars tell us not to think, and political leaders tell us not to think. So we are bombarded from both sides not to think. Just follow blindly. In religion, follow blindly the sheikh. In politics, follow blindly your leader of the party or leader of the country. So let people think for you. They make it easy. Let people think for you rather than thinking for yourself. To our personality, to the mindset, there is so much confusion, a lot of superficial thinking, and that's one of the reasons why people tend to keep distance from one another. Why? Because of that damage that happens to our manners. You know, people can come close to one another only when they have high morals and manners and discipline. Otherwise, I'm going to see you I'm going to keep casual relationship with you. But if I'm very confident and I have strong manners and principles and values and discipline, then I'm not afraid to come close. I have nothing to hide. People nowadays relationships are becoming weak, even within the family, because of lack of good manners. And the only solution is for people to stay away from one another, because if they come close, they are exposed and they discover one another, the true nature, and then they are disappointed. Why? Because unfortunately, this idea of everybody keeping their limits has gone. You're going to have to understand that you have limits. In this life, you have limits that you have to observe. Yes, the limits are between you and people, but they are hudud Allah. Quran calls it hudud Allah. Quran tells us not to step over them, فَلَا تَعْتَدُوهَا, and even not to come near, فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا, in other verses. So you have to know your limits. What does it mean? It means that you have responsibility that you have to fulfill and limits not to exceed. That's the best formula for individual success, for family harmony, for everything. It's for individuals when they have the discipline to fulfill their duties. And as a spouse, you have a job description, you need to fulfill it. And you have limits. Same thing applies to all other roles. Fulfill your duties, observe your limits, and force others to observe their limits. If they cross their limits, push them back. That's the only way things can work. But if people are not doing that, the moment they come close, it's confrontation. Why? They don't have the brakes to restrain themselves. They don't observe their limits. They cross their limits, and then immediately gets into confrontation. Now, in order to fix the situation, remember the 5 steps. 1, accept reality as is. 2, understand how and why you came to this point. That's why a good doctor will ask you about family history. A good doctor, after they do their analysis, or even before, the tests and x-rays and whatever tests they want to do, they ask you about the family history in order to try to understand your situation or your condition. Understand how and why we came to this point. Decide on where you want to go. That's your goal, your vision, the desired outcome. What is the desired outcome for me as an individual, for me as a family, for our community, for your country, whatever? What's the desired outcome? And then develop a plan and strategy and execute it diligently. I said we have serious problems in all steps. Step number 1, we don't want to see the reality as is. We love denial. We prefer denial. We prefer excuses to justify failure. And sometimes even we are ready to call failure success. And we have no problem seeing a failure, either look the other way or justify it or call it success. Just find a way to call it success. Find the minor achievement and blow it out of proportion and then say, we're successful. We're better than before, or we're better than others, etc. Rather than diagnosing and treating the root causes, we prefer dealing with the symptoms, with painkillers, patchwork, patching problems. No clear purpose, no dream or vision. We're just getting by, managing the status quo, no real planning, and we are very quick to develop a comfort zone. Very quick. And we have seen in Arab Spring, people, they make an achievement, they topple a regime, and then they relax. That becomes their new comfort zone. The people don't apply this approach that, okay, what's next? Now that's an achievement, we celebrate it 1 day, 2 days, etc. And then what's next level? Move to the next level. Again, why all of this? Because of that damage that happened to our understanding of Islam, to our personalities, and to our mindsets. Not only we have the wrong version of Islam, the version that surprised the brother that just told me, the version that is very superficial, that does not change even the individual. People can pray, but prayer does not keep them from harming others. Even though Quran is very clear, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ. Salah is meant to increase your ability to restrain yourself. Not only we have the wrong understanding of reality, very superficial. When you see people discussing politics nowadays, so superficial. The discussion is so superficial, and a lot of time avoid the heart of the issue and then busy themselves with marginal, secondary issues. And then the wrong understanding of history, as I mentioned, how and why we came to this point. Now imagine, just to bring the idea closer, imagine a doctor who is not competent to begin with. Well, his competence in medicine is shaky. Like on top of that, he was given the wrong chart and the wrong diagnosis, the chart of somebody else. He's treating you, but he was giving the chart of somebody else. And he was the wrong family history. So the chart, he has the wrong chart, the wrong family history, and there is no competence. What do you think he's going to do here? What kind of treatment is going to come up with? And most of the time, that's what we do with our situation. The wrong diagnosis or no diagnosis, the wrong understanding of the evolution, how we get to this point, and then we want to fix it. There is no way. There is no way you can fix it without proper understanding, in-depth understanding of the reality, and then proper understanding of the evolution, the phases and steps that got you to this point. And then you can talk about the future, because you cannot understand the present time. You cannot develop or prepare or plan for the future without understanding the present time. You cannot understand the present time without understanding how and why you came to this point. So that problematic narration that they mentioned is one reason. The fact that we're saying that there is a narration that is very prevalent among Muslims nowadays. I'm gonna say it, and you will find it very familiar, even though it makes no sense. It's all flaws. Almost every sentence of it or every word of it is flawed. What is this narration? It says that our history was great, all, and drowsy. And Islam bi khair was Islam. We were ruled by Islam. We were called Khalifat al-Muslimin, Amir al-Mu'mineen, etc. So it was an Islamic rule. It was an Islamic rule. Islam was in good shape, and Muslims were, and our history was. And then what? And then people will tell you until the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, we were fine, which is not true. I mean, every sentence of this can be refuted so easily. Until the collapse of Ottoman Khilafah. And that's why some people, they say the solution is to bring Khilafah back because of this narration. If you think that you were good until that point, then the solution would be to bring that system back. Then we had two problems, part of the narration. Then there was two problems. What are these problems? We had occupation, as if it came out of the moon, as if the Ottoman Khilafah collapsed out of the moon. Not, there are reasons for it. And the colonization came also out of the blue. And then we have colonization. And what else? And then people deserted Islam after the collapse of Khilafah, because until the end of Khilafah, everything was perfect. And then we had colonization, that's bad, and people deserted to Islam. The logic says what? The logic says the solution will be what? Solution is to push back the colonization and dependence and to bring people back to Islam. And if we do that, things will be fixed. Now we did that. People managed to push the occupation out and colonization. They got independence. So problem number one, fixed. If that narration was true, if that's the only problem we had. Problem number two, alhamdulillah, people are back to Islam in large numbers. But nothing has changed. You see the confusion when you accept something and then you expect a certain outcome and you get different outcome, and then you start patching and reconciling things that are contradictory. You know, in science, when the findings are different than the prediction, you need to come up with a different theory. Period. There is a theory that predicts certain outcome. You run an experiment, you get different results. You know that theory has to be revisited. No, we don't. We take the finding and try to reconcile them with that theory, because we are not ready to say, unfortunately, we get the wrong understanding. So the first problem was fixed with independence, and the second problem, Islamic movement and Islamic revival brought people to Islam back to Islam in large numbers, and we have seen hijab and beard and masajid full and etc. And then you ask people if that narration is good, is true. Why nothing has changed? Why these, what you call solutions, did not fix the problem? They tell you because of oppression and dictatorship that prevented Islamists from ruling or governing. Right? Arab Spring come, topple those regimes and bring Islamists to power. Nothing has changed. Which means there is a problem in that narration. There is a problem in that theory, or that these things that we take for granted. And then you keep asking why nothing changed. Say they did not let them implement their project. There was a conspiracy. Like, excuses will not end, and therefore we're going to stay where we are. If we're not ready to confront reality, understand how and why we came to this point, and then accept responsibility for what happened, we're going to, as long as we're coming up with these superficial and nonsense explanation and narration, then of course you're not going to do the same thing and expect different results. وَتُوبُ إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوب إليه، نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، من يهدي الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, that's why people are confused and people have a lot of tension inside because they cannot reconcile. If what we have is true Islam, why we don't have the outcome that Islam promises and deliver it in much worse condition in the early days of Islam when it produced a very impressive success stories? So why is that? If what we have, and then we keep explaining everything because it is ibtila, trial and tribulation, qada and qadar, destiny. And then again, never run out of excuses. And then some people will tell you, you know what, they make it even easier. They tell you, you know what, we are okay, aslan. There is no problem. And where do you see problem? Islam is the fastest growing religion, and we are fine. We are okay, and we are on, even if we are not okay, we are on the right track. Inshallah, we'll get there. Time is part of the solution. Keep hearing these things all the time. And if we are not okay, there are some minor problems, and they are not our fault, and inshallah, somehow they will be fixed. Now we're laughing, but believe me, in the back of our minds, that's how the majority of us think, unfortunately. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار واشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا توفنا وانت راض عنا واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا واجعل خير أعمالنا خواتمها وخير أيامنا يوم نلقاك. ربنا ارحم والدينا كما ربونا صغارا وارحم موتانا جميعا موتى المسلمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وأقم الصلاة.